All right, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and Twitter and answer them here in video format. All right, the first question of the day is going to belong to Kudos. Kudos has a question saying, do you think Deshaun Watson is going to... Do I think Deshaun Watson is going to look better than Jacoby Brissett on day one of his return? I'm going to just take this as a compliment to Jacoby Brissett, that he has played so well that we're even questioning this. I'm just going to take that as a compliment for Jacoby Brissett. Yeah, I think Deshaun's going to be better. A rusty Deshaun is better than Jacoby Brissett. And that's no disrespect to Jacoby Brissett, right? But when one dude is paid $45 million and another dude is paid $5 million, you would expect a rusty version of the $45 million quarterback to be much better than the $5 million quarterback. So I think the expectation is that Deshaun Watson is going to look better than Jacoby Brissett on day one. I know look, I get it. It's sports talk. And when people have to do sports talk every day, like myself, you have to come up with stuff to talk about. And an easy thing to talk about, because it's hypothetical and it's not a big enough subject that anybody's going to care about what your opinion was after it was proven wrong or right, is this whole how rusty will Deshaun Watson be? It is tailor-made for sports talk radio and sports talk in general, because it's a hypothetical that you could go on about that nobody's really going to have a strong opinion on either way. I get it. But there is nothing that suggests that rust is something that is going to make a player look drastically different than what they were before. There have been players who have had long hiatuses, have came back and been fine. Even like the best example where Michael Vick went to jail for a couple of years. The season that he started to get regular snaps at starting quarterback, he was just fine. He was just fine, right? I think it's important to remember when we have these conversations about rust in general is that these dudes have not been playing football for like a year. You know what I mean? Deshaun Watson has been playing football for his entire life. Pretty much for his entire life. Like every phase of his life, he has played football at the quarterback position. And for the last, 10 years of his life, it's been at a pretty high, almost professional level, because I do count like Clemson upper level college football as basically professional. You're playing against basically professionals. You're living a professional diet. Like you're basically a professional at that point. He's not going to forget to play football, especially when, has he played in a live regular season game recently? No. But has he practiced recently? Yes. Will he be able to practice? Yes. Like he's going to have all of these things. And I think we're making too big of a deal out the rust. And I think it's primarily because we're bored and we don't have much to talk about other than like firing coaches or stuff like that. But the rust thing, I think, is starting to get over. When we're asking ourselves, hey, do you think Deshaun Watson on day one of his return is going to look better than Jacoby Brissett? I think we've gone too far. And the fact that people are I am aware that it might not be there might be 45% of the people who watch this video that don't think that's a ridiculous question. That's how overblown this whole rust thing has gotten. And I get it. He didn't have a good preseason game. But even in that preseason game, if Anthony Schwartz catches that ball, I promise you he probably scores a touchdown, and we're not even worried about rust. But since Anthony Schwartz drops a pass, we're worried about it now. He will be fine. He might have a slow first quarter, maybe a slow first half, but he will be back to being Deshaun probably by the end of that first game. Now, will he be like 2020 form? I don't know. Like, it's not often that players recreate that level of play. But will he be at a relatively high level of quarterback play? I would assume so. I would assume so. And yeah, there are going to be things for him to get used to. He's probably going to throw 1 or 2 extra picks that he would not throw if he had been playing this whole time. But he's not going to be a drastically different quarterback. He might be a slightly lesser version of himself, or he might be a better version of himself. We've seen Trent Williams come back after 2 years and be better. So it is what it is with that. I don't think rust is really that much of a factor. I mean, even when we see guys like Eric Weddle last year come up from being on the couch all year to suddenly playing safety, like they figure it out eventually. You know, it's a lot of muscle memory that football relies on, right? The long memory stuff is stuff that you can learn off the field. The muscle memory stuff, you know, it takes a little while to get that back, but that's probably 1 or 2 drives for that muscle memory to kick back in, because he definitely has a ton of those muscle memories in his body. So he's going to be fine. I would tend to think he's going to be fine. I think we're really pressing about nothing here. But we'll see. We'll see. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But, you know, we'll talk about it then. Next question comes from IBN, who says the next 3 games are brutal. You break down with the Browns. I don't think the next 3 games are brutal. I think the only brutal game is the Bills. I like the matchup for the Browns against the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins' strengths match up with the Browns' strengths, and I think their weaknesses match up with the Browns' weaknesses. So I don't think they're going to be able to really exploit anything that the Browns can't do. And then they're also one of these offenses that are hit and miss, right? And we've seen this with the Chargers. We've seen this with the Ravens. We've seen this with Cincinnati. Those are the teams that we have a better chance of playing good defense against because they're hit and miss and they're not as consistent in the run game. So I like the matchup versus Miami. The Bills, the one thing I can say about the Bills is, hey, if Denzel comes back, you have somebody for Stephon Diggs. Theoretically, Miles can tackle Josh Allen, and they can't run the ball. So you have a decent enough matchup, but the Bills have been playing such good football that I'm not even going to go there about beating the Bills. But the matchups aren't terrible for you there. And the same thing times 2 goes for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where they're not a good football team. They're not playing well, and they run the ball atrociously. Yes, they have Tom Brady, but that hasn't meant much for them this year. So these next 3 games are not brutal. These next 3 games, you're favorable for 2 of them. And then you play the Bills in Buffalo, which, I mean, if you get that game with Jacoby Brissett, that's going to be something. That's going to be something. All right. The next question comes from Big Papa, who says, is it a positive sign that the defense, that they're going to be showing up? They did the same thing last year. It's a positive sign because, like, better late than never, right? Like, it's better late than never. But it's kind of annoying that y'all keep coming late. You know what I mean? Like, especially when we told y'all need to show up on time this year, right? Like that's what everybody said to the defense. Hey, Deshaun ain't gonna be here for 11 games. We need y'all to show up on time. Can y'all do that? And they said yeah, and then they didn't show up on time. This is the irritation that we have with the Browns defense, is that they be late. They always be late. We told them to be here on time. They're late. That's basically the frustration. And who's in charge of being on time? Joe Woods. Joe Woods showed up late again, bro. Like, that's why I don't feel like he can come back. Even if the defense is fired, we know that the talent's good, but they always be showing up late. I can't have this no more. Like, the stakes are too high now to be showing up late. They're way too high, especially starting next year. The next question comes from Ashton, who says, what is our game plan going into the Dolphins game? Do you think our defense can limit their offense? Yes. The Dolphins are hit or miss. They are a very hit or miss team. Either they're hot or they're not. Yeah, they got Tyreek Hill, and I would want Denzel Ward back for that because we don't really have a corner who can match up with Tyreek Hill in that speed-wise, and I don't want to put Martin Emerson in that situation. And they do have a lot of speed on the corner, right? And I think this might be a game where you got to grab Greg Newsome out the slot and put him outside. But I think you can come up with a good enough game plan against their offense, and I think you could, if you limit possessions and make this a probability game, you can win against the Dolphins. The next question comes from Paul Hines. Says, thoughts on David Bell? Will be getting more targets? I mean, right now the offense is moving great. I have no complaints about it. Would it be great if David Bell got more targets? Sure, but Donovan Peoples-Jones is producing at what we hope David Bell to be producing. And as long as somebody's producing in that spot, I really don't have a problem with who it is. And there's really not more room for that, right? As much as we want Nick Chubb to get more carries, we can't also want David Bell to get more targets because there's just not that many plays to go around on the offensive side of the ball, especially when Jacoby Brissett's out there and we're playing this limited style of offense. So David Bell right now, he's getting the targets that he can get because Amari's eating, David's eating when he comes back, and Donovan Peoples-Jones is eating. So there's really not enough room on the plate for him. Maybe things will open up in a couple years for him. Or maybe things will open up when this passing attack gets opened up with Deshaun Watson. But as of right now, he's getting what he gets because everybody else is eating and eating well. Next question comes from Evan, who says, do you see current Browns taking pay cuts if Watson wins and looks legit? I don't think pay cuts happen anymore. I don't think players really do that, and for good reason, because there's been a history of players taking pay cuts and still like the team not really doing anything with that. So I think agents are now more than ever more hesitant on telling or advising their players to take pay cuts. It really doesn't happen. Like, you can get somebody under market, but there's usually because you got them like for an extra year or two or something like that. Very rarely does somebody say, I'll openly take less money to stay with this team. So no, I don't think anybody's taking less money. The good news for the Browns is that you're not in that position to have to ask anybody to take less money because a lot of the key players are still under contract for the next couple of years. And that is a bit of good GMing, right? That Andrew Berry has locked up everybody, including a quarterback, and now you have a quarter run with for the next 5 years. Earbus says, Vampire Bryce says, are the Browns real playoff contender with Watson coming back in a few weeks? It depends. If they win 2 out of these next 3 games, they are legitimate, serious playoff contenders. They are back. Look, I deemed this team unserious about 2 weeks ago, and they still are unserious. But if they win 2 out of their next 3 games, they are back to a serious team. Now they are playoff contenders, obviously, if that's the case, because their division would be wide open for them. And so with the wild card, yeah, they would be a serious team, a serious playoff contender. And if the defense plays at the level they did on Monday, with an offense that plays as good as we expect it to play with Deshaun Watson, it's going to be a very scary team for anybody to play in the playoffs, especially like the Browns could be the 6 or 7 seed from hell for a lot of teams. So, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. But that's it for the questions this week. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.